All right, everyone, we will get started, and I know there's going to be some individuals who might be still joining us, but thank you everyone for being a part of this breakout session. We're very excited to do a deeper dive into the Instant Network School example and to really look at how partnerships can help sort of set the ground for connected education and have been pivotal in providing continuous education opportunities for refugees and hosting communities during the COVID pandemic. We've got a great panel who are going to give you examples from both DRC and Tanzania to share a little bit about what their experiences have been. And we also have individuals from Vodafone Foundation that are joining. And I see from some of our participants, we also have other coaches and partners of the INS program. And so we do invite people to share their comments, to make reflections as we're going through the session, and ask any questions that you have, and we'll make sure that we've got time for Q&A at the end. But let's get started. We'll dive right in. Hopefully everyone had a chance to catch the opening video that we showed during the main plenary session that gave you a little bit of a snapshot about the Instant Network School program. But first I want to turn it over to Alban, who's our focal point from Vodafone Foundation today and is also the education coordinator on the program. Alban, we know UNHCR and Vodafone Foundation have partnered for a long period of time on the Instant Network School program, I think going back to 2013. And so I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more about what the INS is and the evolution over time. Over to you, Alban.
Thank you, Jackie. Yes, so Vodafone Foundation is really committed to supporting the SDGs and in particular Goal 4 on quality education for all. And we truly believe that every boy and girl should have access to quality education and that technology can play a critical role in making this a reality. And this is particularly true in ensuring that isolated and displaced communities are not left behind. So as you mentioned, since 2013, Vodafone Foundation and UNHCR collaborated on the Instant Network Schools program, which gives refugee and host communities, students and their teachers access to digital classroom infrastructure, therefore ensuring access to quality and relevant learning opportunities. So to deliver this program, we take a holistic approach to improve learning outcomes rather than just learning about technology. So to do that, for each partner schools, we provide them with power, connectivity, hardware, digital educational content, technical support and training. And we work alongside UNHCR and its education partners in the field to deliver this program. To date, we have deployed 36 Instant Network schools across 8 refugee camps. And the program has benefited over 80,000 students and more than 1,000 teachers. And last year in December at the Global Refugee Forum, Vodafone Foundation announced the expansion of the INS program with UNHCR to reach up to 300 schools by the end of 2025. So that means that we will be able to reach over 500,000 refugee and host community students, and they will benefit from the program. And this year we'll start, so in 2020, we'll start by opening up 20 new schools in Egypt and Mozambique.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alban. I think that painted a really good picture of the roots of the program, but also the evolution of what we've seen to date. Now, we know that the focus of this conference and these virtual discussions are to do a bit more of a deep dive on COVID responses and how COVID has created some interruptions when it comes to education. And so I'd like to go first to Wendy, who is joining us from DRC and is working with UNHCR. Wendy, we've all seen the dramatic effects of the COVID pandemic, especially on education, with a lot of school closures. And we've seen that schools have been closed all around the world. And so how is this taking effect? What have you seen in DRC?
Okay, thank you, Jackie, and hello to the audience. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm speaking from the UNHCR office, sub-office of Badolite, that is in the Equator region in the northern part of the country. We host about 172,000 refugees from Central African Republic who are living in 4 camps and out of camp settings. Now, I would just like to start by giving our audience a picture of how it is to live in the camps and what impact the dramatic school closure has had on the refugees and especially the refugee children. Now, the refugee camps in general and the camps in the sub-office of Badolite are already a confined environment and space. And the refugees do not have freedom to move around the way they would want to, just like everybody else. Now, the households they live in host about a minimum of about 5 people and over. And this is already a very confined space for them. Now, for the refugee children, therefore, being able to be out of this space on a daily basis in school, in a bigger and open space to interact with their peers and learn is usually a very great joy for them. For UNHCR and its partners, the schools represent to us a space where we can keep the refugee children in a safe place for most part of the day on a daily basis, a space where we can keep them away from sexual and gender-based violence, a space where we can keep them off from idleness and getting into unsafe activities, and finally, a space where they can access to a fundamental human right to education and be at par with the other children in the rest of the globe. On a daily basis, the refugee children have access to the instant network schools, which we are partnering with Vodafone, and we thank them for their support. And these have been set up, and the refugee children are able to gain knowledge on information technology and drift themselves into a world of endless possibilities as a result. So I would like to say that the news about the school closure because of the pandemic was definitely met with a lot of disappointment, a lot of sadness, a lot of confusion, a lot of uncertainty, and lots of mixed feelings for the refugee children and their parents. The safe space that they've known since they came to the camps is suddenly reduced to nothing. It's not available, and the refugee children have to return to their world of inequality, no access to education. Much as we have solutions being sought for those who are maybe in the bigger towns, it will be a long time before the refugee children may be able to access opportunities to listen on radio or on TV, because they don't even have televisions. Most of them in the camps don't have televisions and radio sets. So this is the kind of impact that the pandemic has caused in the refugee camps right here in the northern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Thank you, Jackie.
Wonderful, thank you, Wendy. And that paints a very real picture of what the situation is like on the ground. And for those that are joining us, we will get to expand a little bit more on what solutions, what opportunities have been presented in DRC. But before we go there, I'd like to turn first to Arep, who is joining us from the International Rescue Committee based in Tanzania, and also one of our partners supporting the Instant Network School program, to tell us a little bit about the context in Tanzania. What was it like, Arep, when schools were being closed on account of protection measures for COVID-19.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. So in Tanzania, as in many other countries, schools have been closed to respond to COVID-19 pandemic. And so in here, the education ministries and other stakeholders have been working together to initiate various programs that will enable children to continue learning while at home. So in the host communities and at the national level, the Ministry of Education makes good use of the national radio and television to air and broadcast lessons for continuous learning, focusing especially with the with classes, with the examination classes. But in the refugee settings, also the Education Working Group, which is a group of organizations implementing education program in refugees contexts, have been pulling up resources from partners to establish program that will enable students to continue learning. So paper-based home learning packets have been used and have been suggested to be used, and also the radio program, where the immediate initiatives that at the moment at the final stages of implementation. So for those who don't know, the home learning packets contains assignments and guidance notes, especially to guide parents to assist, to support their children to learn at home. And there are resources that are designed in a way that they will remain relevant even after COVID-19. The same way as the radio and interactive radio instructions will not only be helpful for the students to continue learning at their homes, but we are also in plan to make use of this material after COVID to complement the resources that we already have at the INS program, as well as the resources that will be used to complement textbooks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Arif. I want to turn it now to Mwenga. And Mwenga is representing the community, but also the INS coaches that have worked day to day in the schools to be able to bring these programs to the community. And Mwenga, I wonder if you can give us a bit of a perspective on what it was like from the lens of the community as people were experiencing school closures and being sort of in the middle, in the thick of it. Mwenga?
Hello, Jackie.
Great, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the question, Jackie. Yeah, it is true that school closure in the refugee community is more than sending students at home. Because the school in the place is the place where children are believed to be safe. And we believe that the schools are there to grow and acquire knowledge and skills to enable them lead decent life, including earning life. But now students are found in the streets, moving from one place to another, and the parents are unable to control the movement, something which has exposed them to sexual exploitation and abuse. Sometimes there is a lack of coping mechanism or events that spread of COVID-19. On the other hand, we have realized that many children find themselves bored, and for a long time they spend at home. So they miss even the activities which they were doing while they are at school grounds. Actually, within the community, early teenage pregnancy and early marriage has increasingly been reported in the camp during the period of school closure. And this is due to being exposed to hostile environments with no support mechanism to help protect from abuse, because agencies working in the camps were not allowed to enter the camps. And many children, we believe that will be not able to return to schools because of being pregnant. Some are married, and also some of them were being exposing to risk of contracting HIV/AIDS, which can push them not to go to school back. Within the community, we believe that the children are unable to find books and that were available in schools. Our children are also involved in household responsibilities, which make them time to study limited. So due to school closures, we believe that some girls have been involved into child labor, into neighboring host communities. Hence, this will be unable for them to continue the education once schools are reopened. So this is what in the community we have been observed during this period of school closures. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mwinga. I think, again, painted a very clear picture of what the situation is like on the ground. I'm going to go back to Wendy for a moment. Wendy, we touched on this a little bit, that there's lots of measures that have been underway trying to look for solutions to ensure that continuous learning opportunities can make their way to refugee communities amongst all of the challenges, and also looking at ways where we can ensure that everyone as best as possible is able to continue supporting. And we know that in some contexts the INS has played a role in this. So can you let us know a little bit more about what's happening within DRC and how you've been able to utilize some of the investments made pre-COVID to help with the continuous education responses?
Okay, thank you, Jackie, and thank you to the audience again. First of all, let me say that the Instant Network schools, before the shutdown, served all the learners in the primary schools in the camps, and they were able to access planned lessons at the centers on a weekly basis. Every day of the week, we have children from the refugee schools going into this Instant Network schools to access their learning material. The centers also served their teachers as a place they could research for teaching material for their students. These centers also served the refugee youth and the host community youth to be able, as a place to have access to online courses and universities and continue with their studies. The centers finally also served a group of refugee adults within the camp and out of camps with a place in which they could easily get access to computer literacy skills. With the shutdown, the access to the centers has not been business as usual for UNHCR and its partners. And we've had to find really creative ways to utilize the Instant Network schools to offer continuous learning to certain really priority groups, because we were not able to continue the big groups of students going into the centers. Now, what did we do in the DRC? The first thing that we've done with the Instant Network schools, we've left open their internet connection on a daily basis to certain priority students. These, for instance, are those that are in their candidate classes, the end of primary school and also secondary school education. Now, what we do is we leave the internet open, and the connection goes to about 50 meters away, 50 meters square away from the Instant Network schools. And with their personal computers and their Android phones, for those who have, the refugees are able to use the internet connection to access their learning sites where they can download some of their revision material and use this to revise from their homes. The internet connection that we have also serves a second group of priority people who have been allowed to access in a similar way this connection that is left open, and these are the teachers in the camps. What they do is they are able to come to the centers and connect with their own computers and with this connection, they're able to download teaching material and revision material. And with the education partner of UNHCR, they've established a program where these teachers are able to go into the community to meet these candidate students during the week and teach them from their homes. Another group of priority people that we've allowed to come and access the internet connection are those ones that were studying for their master's classes. We have a few of the refugees who are studying for their master's classes, so that they did not have to lose touch with their studies. We've also allowed them to come with their computers for those who have and access the centers. Lastly, we have also allowed very special access to certain refugees who have their family members who are in other parts of the world where the pandemic has really hit, and they really need to communicate with their family members. So they're able from time to time, allowed to come, connect onto email and able to speak with their family members on email and on social networks, social media. We also allow them to use the solar panel energy that we have at the centers to charge their phones, to charge their computers. And with these, they're able to keep this charge and use it from their homes in the evenings when the centers are closed. So that is the way we've tried to use these centers to serve the refugees during this pandemic period. Thank you, Jackie.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Wendy. And it's been great to hear how some of the different investments that have been made, even considering sort of the safety measures put in place for social distancing or physical distancing, you've been able to use those investments to provide both teachers and resource banks so they can prepare for the lessons that they're doing with students, but also for people to be able to continue their online studies. I think that was very, very helpful and very promising to know how when these resources are put in place, people can, be quite creative with looking at how to adapt to the context. So let me go next to Arap. Arap, we know in Tanzania, schools are already starting to open back up. And in this context, we know the Instant Network School program, as back to schools are being phased, some of the class sizes need to be smaller. Resources like the Instant Network School are being put to use to support catch-up programs and a whole array of different programming. Can you shed some light a little bit more on what the plans are underway within Tanzania?
Yeah, sure, Jack. Thank you again. So at the moment, we have started to plan lessons with teachers, catch-up and remedial lessons. Now, and we have started with higher secondary students who are also expected to sit for national examinations soon. So at the same time, the radio programming is still continuing to, the teams are continuing to pursue the radio programming, which will continue to supplement what the children have missed during the school closure. So for the use of wireless, we have already prepared a guideline for the use of the centers so as to observe all the health protocols that have been put together by the Ministry of Health. And we are, despite the use of digital learning platform through the INS centers, we have plans to use radio program, as I mentioned earlier, so as to support the classes that will continue with the rest, with the lessons after the schools reopens. And also, maybe let me try to shed some light for those who don't know what an instant networking school is. I think it has been mentioned by my fellow speaker Albane earlier, but I will just shine some light for those who have joined recently. It's a classroom with 50 tablets and power, or there's connectivity, And there are also a laptop and a projector, which the teachers can use to plan their lessons and project in the classrooms, and students are allowed to come and access the materials that are being prepared by their teacher. So in here, we are planning to use also the lessons that the teachers have prepared back in those days, and utilize those materials for catch-up programs and reviews. But also we are planning to use the examination platform, which is one of the platform that we have at the INS centers, where teachers can upload with the questions and for the students to prepare for their examination. So all these materials and resources will enhance self-studies for the students and provision of alternative options for teachers to facilitate their classes. So we are also looking forward to make good use of free digital resources, which are available online, including the links and distance learning platform, which have been offered freely during this time of COVID-19.
Excellent. Thank you, Arab. I think what's particularly interesting also, as you talked about radio instruction, looking at how those radio instruction materials that have been made available, that were actually originally designed for classrooms, are being integrated into the local servers of the INS for use in the classrooms and in other environments. But also, just as you said, all of the great materials that the INS coaches and teachers have produced before will be pivotal to help students with remedial classes and helping them catch up and review materials that might be a little bit forgotten or a bit removed, having been out of school for so long. But with that, let me go back to Mwenga, because Mwenga, you have served as an INS coach for a long time. I think you were there at the start of the program within Tanzania, and so you know how pivotal it is, both to have teachers and INS coaches at the heart of the program. For you, as you think about back to school, what role do you imagine for the INS coaches, helping with, as Arab said, some of these catch-up programs and helping ensure that students are motivated to return back to school?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the time. As you have said, that really I've been in the INS for a long time, and we have the different roles as we are playing as INS coach. Actually, I believe that during this period, students will be much happy coming back to schools, as I know that they have missing the usage of INS classroom. As such, they will be motivated to see their colleagues as subjecting themselves into COVID-19 contracting risk. For that, as the principal role that our INS coach are supposed to play during this period, and this may include to ensure that the protocol provided by the Ministry of Health are observed by both teachers and students. So in the first day back to school, I will orient students on the COVID-19, on the signs, how it spreads, and how to protect from contracting. And this may include protective measures as we have been trained. This should include creating awareness on COVID-19 so that they can be also able to support their siblings, families, students, and teachers' well-being, social, emotional learning, psychological first aid, training, as well as referral mechanism in place in the case COVID-19 signs are identified and steps to be taken. Also, I will make sure that all INS facilities are clean and safe to be used by learners and students, teachers and students. On the other hand, I will support teachers to look or prepare for the additional resources online that will enable teachers to cover their topics smoothly. Also, learners will be supported to revisit the materials which have been created and uploaded on the server by teachers as part of self-studies. Also, coaches will be supporting teachers to upload questions on the examination platform for students who are expected to sit for the national examination to prepare. That to say, Form 4 students and grade 8 students who are supposed to sit for the national exam this year. Then we'll be supporting them and look at the questions uploaded on the platform. As a coach also, I will support to provide teachers with alternative options to use the INS classroom, especially during this time where students' number in one class is very, very limited. So I think these are the roles that I will be playing as a INS coach during this post-COVID-19 period. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Moinga. So I know we're very close to time being finished, but as noted, we started a little bit late. So I'm going to go for one last question to Alban, and then we'll open up. We've seen some Q&A questions, particularly from individuals residing in other locations, also looking at Malawi and wanting to know what programs, what services, and maybe even lessons learned we can take away from the context within DRC and Tanzania to ensure that in those contexts, individuals are able to benefit as well. But first, Alban, let me come back to you just to say, again, as we reflect on COVID-19, the pandemic, the measures that have been put in place that have created interruptions in school, but also the creative solutions and ways that we've been able to find to utilize resources like the INS. Do you have any reflections on both the model of the INS, which has really focused on sort of a facility model, so based out of schools and community centers, but also where we need to go in the future when we look at connected education and the opportunities that programs like this bring? So Alban, over to you.
Great, thank you, Jackie. Yes, I think with the COVID pandemic leading to school closure in most countries, the INS program, but also all the school-based models have been largely affected and seen reduced activities during this period. But we also heard from Wendy, for example, that we had numerous examples of how the INS continued to make a difference for refugee and host communities. And Wendy mentions lots of examples, and I think other use cases around being able to access timely and accurate information about the virus and protocols to help reduce its spread. We've seen a clear role for the INS here and the use of the connectivity. So this unique situation is challenging us, definitely, but it's also, I think, opening up new opportunities to strengthen education programs on the long term. And now that schools are slowly reopening and new initiatives are being put in place, like the one led by my colleagues in Tanzania and DRC, who I really want to thank for the fantastic job they have been doing every day to ensure access to the INS while keeping everyone safe and following all the social distancing protocols. Without you, we can't achieve what we've been able to do so far. So thank you for that. And I truly believe that the COVID crisis is a real catalyst that accelerated the rollout of online and blended learning and has demonstrated how technology can be used to straighten or to temporarily substitute to classroom instructions. Having said that, the in-school and remote learning approaches, I think, should be considered as complementary to further support children and youth in their journey, in their learning journey. And to be successful, we need all the stakeholders to work together to ensure that all the elements are in place to support the students, the teachers, and the wider community. And in particular, I'm thinking about the local authorities who needs to put in place and the right regulation, the policies and the framework, and and also think about accompanying teachers with dedicated training and relevant skills development to make sure that they feel supported and they have what they need to adopt technology and drive usage, because we know teachers are key in the process. To be able to be successful, we also need to engage with digital educational content publishers and platform providers. Access to content is similarly critical and needed. And finally, we need to engage with all the infrastructure partners, being the network operators for internet connectivity, electricity companies for access to power, and then finally the device manufacturers to make sure we have a wide access to devices to be able to roll out those programs. And at the Vodafone Foundation, we are doing our best to leverage Vodafone company assets to contribute to connected education through the INS program. But we also are providing free access to online resources via the Instant School program, for example. And even more recently, so during the COVID emergency phase, we signed some deals with education platforms such as Udemy and Perligo to provide free access during this period. So to drive a positive change in the future, we really invite all interested parties to join us to support access to quality education and UNHCR's connected education in particular. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Alban. So we do have some questions again that I did promise that we would go to, and I think Alban, you made a nice segue to talk about the need for more partners, more investments, really for collaboration. I see there's a question that we had from Serge and one from Jacques as well, saying, what about individuals within the Zilika camp in Malawi? Education has been suspended on account of the pandemic, and is there any support for different organizations for refugee education in Malawi? So I'll take this one as UNHCR's lead for connected education, just to say that we are working with a variety of partners. I know in Zilika there's been investments in the past that have been made by Microsoft and others to equip with the App Factory and other connected education resources that we're in conversations with the partners on the ground to see how best to leverage those contributions to ensure that we can make the steps to leverage those resources and provide continuous education opportunities. Also looking, as we heard in the various panels, in complementing this with other low-tech resources, understanding that in some locations where we haven't had heavy investments in connected education in the past, it's really difficult to rapidly scale up those contributions. And so this is why we think it's really important, and we've been using examples like we have from Tanzania and DRC to showcase what can happen when these resources are actually invested on early in, so that when you do have interruptions in school, these can be leveraged to ensure that you can support continuous learning opportunities. But one thing we've recognized as UNHCR is there needs to be a huge amount of more investments being made to support connected education, to put in place strong connectivity infrastructures. And as Alban articulately put, I think one of the things that we've noted with COVID is really demonstrating how contributions can be how greater contributions can be made and how versatile connected education can be in these contexts. So I'm seeing a couple more questions. We're told that we should invite people to put those in the Q&A. Just because of the number of participants we have, I don't think we can open up the mics, but I'm gonna read the next question here. That says, are there specific tech partners or partners in social enterprise who you know can avail of portable computer devices to refugee children and youth at a subsidized cost? And this is coming from our partners at Windle International Kenya. Maybe Alban, if you don't mind, I'm going to talk I'm going to pass this to you because I know that Vodafone Foundation has also been engaged with a number of hardware partners trying to look at what can be accessible, and then I'm happy to share also more from the UNHCR side.
Yes, thank you, Jackie, and thank you for the question. So I think we would be really happy to discuss the specifics and the projects behind. And Vodafone Foundation, as Jackie mentioned, has in the past provided some smartphones or tablets, depending on the needs identified to specific projects. So would be happy to take that offline and have this discussion. There are a number of enterprises involved in the education space as well that offer deals around hardware to be used for education purposes and for refugees in particular. So very happy to talk about the specifics as well offline and to share some relevant contacts if that's appropriate.
Great, thanks, Elvan. One of the things that I'll say, again, from the UNHCR perspective is we've had a great number of partnerships with different private sector companies, different social enterprises. I think during COVID, the demands that were made for in-kind resources, as well as looking at having models that could be rated at cost or could be provided in a rapid means was actually, there was a significant demand. And this wasn't just coming from UNHCR and other UN partners. We were seeing this all around the world. Even within the US, I know there was huge requests for resources to be provided. Where I'm from in Canada, we saw the same thing. In Europe, the same. We also saw a lot of ministries as they were making provisions to loan equipment to their citizens, also extending those offers to refugees. But we know that, always having in-kind resources won't be sustainable to meet the demands. And so I think this is where we have to look at longer term development initiatives and investments to really equip schools and all schools with these resources so that we can make sure there's equitable access to education. So I think there's definitely more work to be done. And I think what is wonderful about programs like the INS and so many of the other connected education programs is they show really what is possible when those investments are made and helping to make the case for further investments as well. So I see that there's one more question that we'll go to, and then I do think we'll have to close it out. Just to say that there's a question here that relates to the question around Zalika, but really touches on this issue about learners who have been out of school for a while and might be facing different types of pressure in terms of the return to school, but also engagement in other activities that might be detrimental to them. And so how can we leverage and ensure that education and the opening back of schools and catch-up programs can actually incentivize the return to school? And so Mwenga, can I go first to you to again kind of give this community perspective, but what do you think the value of initiatives like the INS are in terms of attracting students back to the classroom and helping to ensure healthy social behaviors?
Yeah, thank you once more, Jackie, for the question. What I believe right now is that the INS centers are very, very useful in our refugee community. Because the centers are serving the wider community, not only teachers and students, but also to involve the community members. So I trust that our community members have benefit power to charge their devices, as we have a full of power. Also, they use the INS to communicate with their relative abroad in their country and searching for the information and learning free courses online. What I believe that also in the INS schools, in the schools where there are there are no libraries and laboratories, I think the NSC centers have been the useful tools for teachers to teach science subjects and practical lessons as well. So with the limited teachers guidelines and student textbooks that we experience in the camp, the NSC centers have been able to supplement the gaps that our teachers and students faced for the long time. And during this time of COVID-19 pandemic, I think the ENS classrooms are very, very more useful as they can play a big role for students and teachers on the catch-up programs. And on the other hand, I feel that this is a great investment that make changes to the life of refugees, which also need to be expanded to other centers so that they need refugees, children, and youth can access and benefit from this wonderful investment that Vodafone has put in place for refugees, children, and wider community, especially at the post-COVID-19 period. So I think this can be the ideas I can summarize when responding to your question. Thank you, Jackie.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mwenga. And yes, having supported these programs from a long period of time, it's interesting to see what are some of the pull factors and interesting factors. And I've talked to many parents who have reiterated that, you know, knowing that their children are building up their digital literacy skills and therefore having the ability to interact safely with the internet and communicate with others, they see as vital for opening up opportunities for them for their future. And I've heard it also from the students themselves, that everything from knowing they can charge their phones to also being able to really engage online and be part of a broader community and be part of sort of the digital revolution that's going on is vital, not only at times of the pandemic of COVID, but also as sort of a lifeline to the outside world. So thank you very much for that, Mwenga. I know there's also a couple of other Q&As, but I think we're over time, so we're going to have to close it out there. What I would like to say is I know from the participants joining, we have many people who are part of the INS in various different countries, be it South Sudan, Kenya, DRC, Tanzania, who are joining these discussions, along with many other colleagues and partners who are contributing to connected education. And I just really like to thank all of you for your efforts. We know it's an uphill battle and there's a lot more that we need to do, but all of you have played such an important role in showing what is possible. And so hopefully in the years to come, we'll have more and more investments and we can continue to learn from the COVID responses and creative uses of tools like the INS. So again, let me say a huge thank you to Alban, Wendy, Mwenga, and Arap for sharing their perspectives, all much more articulate than myself, and did a great job of painting a picture of the realities on the ground. So a huge thank you to all of you and to everyone who's joining the conversation today. And just to say, this isn't the end, it's a start. So please do send us any of the questions that you have. You can put them into the chat and we'll be happy to follow up with you over email. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jackie,
Thank
for your
you.
time. Please.
Thank you, Jackie. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, bye.